you are here, in this particular instance, to hear Scott Berger tell us all about, hello, the data science of roguelikes. So take it away, Scott.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Christy, for hosting this session, and thanks to the wonderful organizers for the Roguelike Con in general. We wouldn't be here without you, so we thank you first and foremost. Yeah, welcome to Roguelike Data Science. All sorts of fun deep dives of tables of data, visualizations, and stuff like that. So we have 30 minutes. Let me start my timer real quick so I don't go over. And let's just jump right in. So a little bit about me. Hello, I'm Scott, he, him. I am a Seattle data person, data analytics, data science, machine learning, all those things. Like all data science people in the Seattle world, I've done my time at Microsoft. I've done data time at Tableau, and most recently at Qualtrics downtown. I fly small airplanes. I have a master's in astrophysics from University College London. We've seen some other London folks here as well, so happy hello from down the road. I race bikes when I can, as best I can. I wrote a book on machine learning with the programming language R. If you've ever wanted to get into it from that angle, you have 200 pages of resource there. I have a roguelike podcast that I do with three other friends of mine who we just passed our 1-year anniversary of hosting the show. And I am an adult student of the cello, and I play with my wife, who's very patient to accompany me on the piano whenever I have recitals and stuff come up. But you didn't come here to listen to me. You came here to listen about what this talk is about. So first, I'm going to start with what this talk is not about. If you are coming to this recording out of the blue, and you're like, oh, I really like data science, I really like video games, but I don't really know what this whole roguelike space is about. That, I think, is the one thing that I'm not going to be talking about here. I think in this general space, I think the attendees for the past, 4.5 hours have probably got a good indication as to what roguelike games are. So I don't think I'm going to beat it over the head too much, but we will talk about the data of this ecosystem. And just to show for the podcast for another 10 seconds, we recently just did a near 2-hour podcast on the topic. So I think what has been said, if you're interested, go and hunt down that episode. So what is this talk about? Okay, talked about what it isn't about. What is it about? It's a little bit of hacking, programming. It's a little bit of data visualization, a little bit of cool graphs. It's a little bit about, I guess we'll say, market analytics as well. But overall, we have 3 objectives for this talk. 1, where do we go to find these rogue-style games? Where can we go and how can we build good data sets to explore this stuff? And lastly, what can we learn from the data as well? So that's our 3 main objectives for the next 25 minutes, we'll say. And we're here to talk about roguelike games. Everything from goofy slot machine rogues to dungeon-based rat punchers to ensemble alien spaceship management games to things that look like strong password generators. These all exist in roughly the same universe of stuff, and we'll be looking at all the data from each end of the spectrum and everything in between. But in order to do that, first, we're going to need data. Lots of data. And there's many places in which to search for data about these rogue type games. A good place to start is maybe the Temple of the Roguelike. Maybe a lot of viewers and watchers have heard of this site, but this is a site that judiciously and very graciously tabulates and formulates data from the Rogue Basin Wikipedia that coalesces it down into a very tabular format. And we have lots of fun things to explore in here. But the 2 types of data that we're very interested in are, number 1, fact data, things that are independent variables that we can glom stuff onto to learn more of. and things like metadata. So what are things about that data? So for example, a fact data instance might be DCSS here up at the top, Dwarf Fortress, NetHack, ADOM, and the metadata around it would be things like the type that it is, what kind of theme that it is. And in this screenshot here, we have lots of interesting data to think about already. We have things like average ratings. We have things like numbers of ratings, with DCSS having, for example, 26, 19 for Dwarf Fortress, and so on down the line. With Hyper Rogue, let's see if I can get my camera, Hyper Rogue t-shirt here on there. Just a quick shout out on here as well. So we have lots of things to explore from just one particular example space. But there's lots of example spaces with which we can find this data from. Another one many people know of is itch.io. And here, if we go and type in the tag roguelike up here in the upper left, see if I can get my mouse. Anyway, we'll get something that's like 10,000 results of data, that's pretty good. Like, that's a good, solid, meaty data set to start building stuff off of. And from here, we can kind of see from the top level things like genres, role-playing, strategy, survival, action. We have things like platforms that they're available on. This is all good stuff, and we want to try to get this all into a nice, boring Excel table that we can make pretty pictures out of. If we click on any one of these, we could get data that looks like this, where we have things like status, rating, author, various genres and tags, to something that looks like this, where we have something that was like, when was it last updated? What's its current status? The ratings, average session length, languages. There's a lot of data here, and it varies very much from game to game. I'm sure there's lots of people here that have had to deal with free-form text input data and consistencies therein. There's a lot of stuff going on. But one of the major kind of hindrances with the itch.io platform is getting access to this data, being able to go in and say, okay, I want, for all those 10,000 games, give me all this stuff and just dump it into an Excel spreadsheet for me, please. Even with my data hunting abilities, I've found it very difficult, if not impossible, to do so. That's not to say that it couldn't be done, but there's not really a good application programming interface, or API, in order to go in and extract this data into a nice, clean data set. Let's briefly talk about the mobile space. For all of my complaints about the itch data backend, if we go into Google Play, for example, and we hunt for roguelikes, this is kind of it for what we see. Is there more? Question mark. I mean, we have things like rating data, price data, but I was kind of shocked that there wasn't much more. So clicking around, clicking on an individual game. Okay, we have ratings, we have downloads. This is all good stuff. We have descriptions, last updated. Curiously, the tags here don't include roguelike, which is a fun, interesting element. But we have things like user reviews as well. So this is all interesting stuff. And if we thought the itch data was locked down, mobile data is even more locked down. Getting access through this walled garden for data might actually be impossible, from what I can tell, unless you have a good way to build a web data scraper that doesn't get you banned immediately. So all of these things are kind of pointing us into the last logical step direction for Steam, everyone's favorite platform for finding games. And here we go and do our great thing of hunting through the tag categories and find the thing that says roguelike. Open up that can of worms and see what games fall out of it. Here we have lots of good stuff of rating categories, user review counts. We have all sorts of tags involving things like action roguelikes. We have lots of games that are listed of various ends of the spectrum. We have other subgenres that we can cut by. Lots and lots of good data. That's all great. The power here is the application programming interface, the API that allows us to say, oh, if we have a list of games that we want all this data for, give me the data, please. And that beautiful data looks like this. This is what a raw API data export for Cogmind, traditional roguelike game, looks like. Isn't this beautiful? We have all sorts of things in here, like what type of data entity it is from a game. We have the name, we have Steam app IDs, required ages to play, all sorts of fun stuff. But this is kind of an unintelligible garbage nonsense in this view anyway. We can put these into parsers to make it a little more intelligible, and we're able to kind of see things that we can pull stuff out, like total numbers of reviews, how many achievements does it have, all sorts of fun things. And the way that we go about building the data set that we're going to be talking about today is kind of in 3 major steps. Source code will be linked later. I can drop some notes over by the obelisk if we're interested in deep diving. But the idea here is we have a collection of Python scripts and functions that go out and hit the Steam API, pull down data, and we join it all together into one big data set. We have some historical polls of this data, so we have snapshots of what it looked like back in March, sometime around June, and the most recent one around October 4th or so. And so what we're doing is for each game, we're pulling the sort of main metadata, things like release date, review counts, all of the tags associated with them. We're pulling review data, how many hours were there being played by users, and as we'll get to in a second, tag data in terms of key value pairs, so all sorts of great things. And here's what the data looks like. Isn't this beautiful? Again, who doesn't love looking at spreadsheets? This is what you all came here for. So we have things like the name of the game, release dates, dictionaries of tag data, total reviews, all this fun stuff. And it goes on for columns and columns and columns. But you're not here to look at tables. You're here to look at all sorts of pretty pictures and things. That's why I'm here. That's why we're all here. But first, there's some pretty pictures in here. But the first thing that you do with any good tabular data set is look at some summary statistics. And in the Steam ecosystem, I think we kind of know this, but there are 6 major categories of rogue type tags that we can look at. We have games that are tagged with roguelike, which is about 6,000. We have games that are tagged with roguelite, which is somewhere around 4,000, 5,000. We have action roguelike games, 3,700. And here's where we see kind of a major shelf of game tags and application rates. Roguelike deck builders, 400. Traditional roguelikes, 326. And Roguevanias, 175. What's important to note here is that these are not be-all, end-all tags. These are things that can exist in multiple ways. So someone can take their game and tag it as roguelike and roguelite, and in some cases, all of these. There's all sorts of crazy things in the data set. And because you can have things that span multiple categories here, there's about 7,870 rogue-style games across all of these different tag genres. So, okay, this is great. This gives us an all-up view picture of different tag types, different realms of the data that we might be playing in. But show me some graphs. I want to see some stuff of how this is evolving over time. What we're seeing here on the left, the blue curve, is the total number of games that have been released in this whole data set by year over time. And on the right is the specific breakout of games that are tagged a traditional roguelike. So on the left here, what we're seeing is, games that were the tag system was introduced later, but games that have any rogue style tag applied first started showing up around 2010 or so, and increasing. And since 2019, there's been an electric pace of game development, of rogue games being released in general on Steam over time. And we see that reflected in the traditional roguelike space as well. We had a bit of a bump of activity in 2017. And since 2019, it's just been taking off nonstop. So I think we're in a pretty good place to be, either as fans of the genre to have lots of options to play, or as developers to learn from other people's things and be able to see how things are evolving and what games are really pushing the trend and envelope. Which, speaking of which, key driving games. So this is kind of a busy chart. There's a lot going on here. I'll walk through it step by step. We have on the x-axis games release dates. So what year were they released? On the y-axis, we have how many total reviews those games have. The different colors are just ways to separate different games. So each game name is a different color on here. That's just what the color signifies. But the size of the dot here is something that we can use with the tag data to show what proportion of a game's total tags are any of those 6 rogue categories. So kind of roguiness all up score, if you will. A bigger circle means more roguey, if that is even a thing. And a smaller score is less of that proportion. And so what we see here is things like FTL, Binding of Isaac, big players. Also this is for games with more than 10,000 reviews. Otherwise, this chart would be a lot busier, as you can imagine. So things like FTL, Binding of Isaac, early stages, Binding of Isaac Rebirth, big Titan. We have other familiar names, Darkest Dungeon, Enter the Gungeon. We have Don't Starve Together way up here at the top, over 400,000 reviews. There's some interesting stuff behind that. But we have things like Dead Cells Slay the Spire, Vampire Survivors as a more recent major review driver. But if we split this out again by traditional roguelikes, we have kind of a different picture. We have things like Dreadmore, Tome, Caves of Cud being major leaders early on. And since then, it's not that there hasn't really been a major leader in the category on Steam. There's just been a lot of stuff being developed. So we see things like Cogmind, Tangledeep, Jupiter Hell, to a lesser extent, Desktop Dungeons, with some curiousness about its review date changing there. We have some games like we were seeing earlier, just a lot of development of new stuff here in the more recent years as well. So an interesting space to be in. We've talked a little bit about Steam tags. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive here. Steam tags, for those who don't know, are kind of a controversial topic, but let's maybe walk through how they work. So if you come to a games store page, you might see these popular user-defined tags for this product, and we have a bunch listed out here. And in fact, if you click that little plus button, we'll have even more. Typically, games have about a maximum of 20 tags that can be applied. You might say to yourself, well, these seem kind of randomly ordered: space, stealth, indie, top-down. Like they just kind of seem jumbled around here. These are things that users can vote on to say, oh, I think this game is a top-down shooter, click, or add that category on there. And devs can also change those around as well. They have some input authority on there. But how are these sorted? Well, if we do our favorite thing and look at the source code behind the page, we see that this tag data is organized by count. So we have in the Steam store just what seems like a random grab bag of tags are actually ordered by the frequency at which they're applied. So we have space count 118, stealth count 113, following the trend down the line, and in a little more human readable format here. So this is how the data is ordered. This is where Steam tags provide a lot of interesting data for us to explore and lots of things for us to gripe about. One thing to explore here, we kind of touched on a little bit earlier about roguiness values. So what proportion of all of these tags here are things related to the rogue realm? So here we have something like action roguelike, we have roguelike, we have roguelite, several tags being applied. If we add all those up and divide by the total number of counts here, that gives us a proportionality score. We can see this proportionality score laid out in a histogram. So what this is showing us is the top chart are all rogue games that aren't traditional roguelikes, that are not explicitly tagged as such. And the one on the bottom are for only traditional roguelikes. And we're seeing this rogue proportionality score laid out on the x-axis, and the frequency of how many games fall into that sort of bin on the y-axis. And what this shows us is how many games are falling within a certain band of that proportionality. So in plain English, this top part here is saying, well, for games that aren't explicitly tagged as traditional roguelike, that roguiness proportion can be anywhere as low as like basically 0.1% all the way up to maybe 40-ish% or even a little higher. This top histogram here is pretty spread out. It's kind of wide. Traditional roguelikes are a little more narrow, a little more constrained with where those values are. So we see the middle chunky part of the traditional roguelike one is maybe a little off to the right from where the main body of non-traditional roguelike games are. Curiously, we also see some traditional roguelike games that are possibly over-indexed by having more than 60% of their tags as rogue-based, which may or may not be surprising, but is very infrequent as we see from the data. Now, Steam tags, their controversy comes with going into the store and saying, I would like one roguelike, please. And Steam saying, great, you want some roguelikes? We got them for you. But sometimes the breadth of our genre kind of offers a hindrance with the area of Steam tags specifically, where on one hand, you might get something as real-time action-oriented as Don't Starve Together, and on the other hand, you might get something as turn-based and slow RPG burn as Caves of Cud. Now, Steam will say, these are both roguelikes, even though one is maybe quote-unquote more than the other. There's a lot of quotes, air quotes going on here, but what we can do is we can say, well, let's look at the distribution of each game's tags and the frequencies, and we'll do some math. This thing on the right is saying, like, we're just going to do some math to say, how similar are these things? So for Caves of Cud and Don't Starve Together, Caves of Cud up on the top and Don't Starve on the bottom, we have all the different tags between the two and frequency and the proportionalities for each of those tags for each of those games. And so what we're seeing here is Don't Starve Together, 1.5% of its total tags are 2D. Caves of Cud does not have that tag, 0. The end result for this is that, well, comparing these two, we only have a few categories that even line up remotely. And by doing that hand wavy math from before, we can turn the handle on our math crank, get out a number. And that number is that these are, according to that particular math calculation, 18.3% similar. Great. How does that rank against the rest of them? Well, I'm glad you asked, because what if instead we compared some other games that maybe on the face of it might be more similar to each other? So let's compare two survivor-like games of the Rogue genre, the Rogue universe. On the top, we have the game Bone Razor Minions. And on the bottom, we have a game, maybe you've heard of it, called Vampire Survivors? I don't know. And on our assumption is that these games should be roughly similar. There's some categories that don't line up, and that's totally fine. I wouldn't expect all categories to line up every time, but we do the same hand-wavy math calculation. These games are 96% similar. That's kind of a big difference between the 18% that we saw before. So if someone is coming to a platform and hunting for something, they might be expecting something more similar to the thing that they might be looking for. Just for funsies, let's compare Vampire Survivors and Tales of Maj'Al. Any guesses? Any guesses? Not a whole lot of category overlap here, but there's some 15% similar. Likewise, if we compare something like Tales of Maj'Al here on the bottom with Shattered Pixel Dungeon up at the top, probably pretty similar, right? This one actually has more categories that aren't aligned, but the ones that do align pretty well. So something like Dungeon Crawler here, 10% and 6%, that's a pretty good alignment compared to something like Mystery Dungeon, which is 0% for Tome and 5% for Shattered Pixel Dungeon. The score here is 80%. So that's pretty good, right? Like if someone was like, hey, I'm looking for a game like Tales of Maj'Al, but more recent, and I want to be able to play it on my phone or something like that, you might be able to suggest them Shattered Pixel Dungeon with a pretty good degree of confidence. The next logical thing to do is to say, well, we have the original Rogue on Steam. What games are the most similar to it according to this hand-wavy mathematical approach? This is by no means a quality metric. This is very much a sterile mathematical metric to say, yeah, I mean, you have stats and math and all that good stuff. It's just going to output a number. So let's see what games are most similar just for this entertainment purposes. This is for entertainment purposes only. Well, we have some games in the 60% that line up to Rogue following the methodology that we've just been doing. We have some games roughly in the 70-ish% area that line up. These are all things that we would roughly expect, as well as kind of our top ones here with Mid-Boss, Amulet of, I think that's an I, Yovar, we'll say, Dead Zoned, a Credits Bounty, and the number one, let's bring it in for number one here, the most similar game to Rogue on Steam, according to this methodology, we'll say, caveat, caveat, asterisk, asterisk, Zorbus, 79%. Congrats. But I think what's missing here in the Steam ecosystem is a nuanced search. So when you go into Steam and you're saying, hey, I would like a roguelike game, please, click. Oh, great. We have a whole list of things that can span this whole broad genre of things that we were just talking about. And what I'm envisioning in my mind with this great UI mockup that I've done here, again, data guy, not a UI guy, I'm envisioning something, you click on a tag, you have that tag show up, and a little slider underneath that allows you to say, I'd like a game that has a proportionality of tags for roguelike that's like, we'll say at like the maximum end of the spectrum. I want something that hacking is like, maybe in the 25%. And robots, yeah, I want something that's like pretty robot driven. There's a few games I can think of off the top of my head that would satisfy this criteria, but I'm interested in the ones that I don't know of that satisfy that criteria. And in that case, that would help us find games that are similar, but also help for discoverability and give nuance to our search. I think that's what's missing here. It doesn't say tag nuisance search, it says tag nuance search. So I think if the Steam Labs people want to put together an experiment to try to test it out, I think this one would be ripe for experimentation. Continuing on a little bit more with Steam tags here, if we look at, let's see, the verbiage for this is very specific. Let me read a little bit. So this is saying across the y-axis is our release date as usual. But what this is saying, of all Rogue games released on Steam in 2023, the average percent of proportional roguelike tags applied was 4%. And for action roguelikes, our red curve here was 3.9%. And Roguelites was 3.7%. So what is this saying? What this is saying is kind of like an evolution of that tag proportionality per game over time, or at least by release date. There's another way to look at this by snapshot date that might be a little more accurate, but that's hard to keep that data refreshed. So using release date as kind of an intermediary here, we can see that like the amount of games that had roguelike as its main tag applied, very common early on, but that's kind of come down some and equilibrated with roguelite tags, as well as action rogue tags. And these are kind of converging all into a similar clustered space where, again, this is for an all games picture. Things like roguelike deck builders, traditional roguelikes, and roguevanias are not as commonly used. I think the prevailing wisdom here is that when someone is, you can either use a roguelike deck builder tag specifically and only, or more commonly you can say, oh, my game is a roguelike tag and a deck builder tag. And in that case, there's lots of overlap of genres. If we split this out by traditional roguelikes, we can see, oh, roguelike and traditional roguelike, unsurprisingly, are pretty tightly correlated with each other over time. 2019 had something interesting happen where there was something where someone over-indexed and has a lot more of their tags for roguelike versus traditional, but that's okay. But what's interesting here is to show that we have a lot more spread out or uniform distribution of these numbers versus very clustered from before. Really quickly about how long people are playing games. I only have a few more minutes here, but let's speed run this as best we can. If we look at review data, we can see how long people have been playing the game at review time, and we can bucket those by how many games. So what we're seeing here on the x-axis is the median percentile of playtime for a given game. And we're seeing how many games have that percentile value. The orange curve is just a running sum and gives us a good way to say, well, Pareto principle, let's say like the 80% is a good cutoff value. So how long are people playing rogue games for all types? That roughly comes down to about 20-ish hours on, I was going to say on average, but in this case, it'd be more on median. How's that compare for traditional rogues? Traditional rogues is a little higher, 35 hours, which comes out to maybe about a 40% longer time of engagement for traditional roguelike games than other types of games in this space. We can break this out by looking at the 10th percentile, 50th percentile, and 90th percentile values for each of our release dates. And we can slap an average line in there too, just for funsies and make it a little simpler. That way we can see how people generally are playing these games over time. We can see how the data evolves compared to that average middle line. And we can see how do those lines compare. So unsurprisingly, the 10th percentile of play times throughout time, about 5 to 6 hours. People are spending 30-ish hours for the median play time, and the 90th percentile, about 140 hours. We got some dedicated folks. So how does this compare with traditionals? Traditionals, a little bit higher. We see the 10th percentile of people engaging in traditional roguelike games is about 9 compared to 5, 45 compared to 30, 300 compared to 138, so almost double in that sense. So a very kind of different level of engagement picture. So in the last couple minutes here, what are some takeaways from all this data? We've seen a lot of stuff. I think a number one takeaway is that it's a good time to be a fan of the genre. It's a good time to be a developer of the genre. We have a lot of stuff being developed, a lot of stuff to engage with, a lot of stuff to learn from. I think if I had a wish list from itch, it would be, can I have some more data, please? I would love to be able to take the Steam data set that I've built out and add itch data in there, some 7-day RLs in there, really to make it a more robust data set. But that's hard to do if there's no API, and I kind of don't want to punish the servers with web scraping as much as I can, and provide counts for how many tags that are being applied. I think that, as we've seen, that's a pretty useful thing. Mobile game data space, anything would be great, honestly. APIs of any kind, but it's such a black box, it's almost not even worth talking about. Steam, more refinement. I think we need more tools to really kind of refine the searches that we're after. Roguelike games are a big varied space. I think we kind of all know that. And being able to set limits on what proportionality of a specific tag we have would be super valuable. And for people to hunt for traditional roguelikes specifically, I think that's a very specific, big part of this community that if we're just hunting by only roguelikes, yeah, we're going to get drowned out by more popular, commercially successful games. But there's a good space of active development here, and either voting on games with this tag or actively seeking them out is a good benefit. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've talked about some stuff already. There's some stuff in here that we haven't even remotely talked about yet, and some stuff that we probably shouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. But that's just the tip of the analytics iceberg. There's so much to explore here. So if you want to connect up and talk more about data, at me on Mastodon, either the podcast or me directly. Reach out to the podcast, give us a listen, see what you think. And I have a data science blog of all sorts of video game analytics stuff like this. If you want more info, maybe I'll drop these links over by the aforementioned obelisk. And lastly, thank you. Thanks to the organizers. Thank everyone for really creating such a rich game space. And yeah, this whole area and ecosystem in Talk wouldn't exist without everyone else. So thank you.